Newsroom. Today in the France 24 debate, a case that's front-page news in this country.
Hello, France. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy and very emotional.
Florence Cassé back in her native France after 7 years in a Mexican prison. She'd been convicted as part of a kidnapping ring. Her 60-year sentence strained relations between Paris and Mexico to near breaking point. Wednesday, the Supreme Court finally threw out a case that included a reenactment dressed up as her actual arrest on live national television. A hero's welcome in France. A bitter pill for some Mexicans who are either victims of a fraught justice system or the families of the thousands kidnapped every year, mostly for ransom, mostly by drug cartels. Now, Mexico has a new president. He's from an old party. And 46-year-old Enrique Peña Nieto and the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which ruled Mexico for decades, find a fresh way to tackle rampant crime that's undermining Mexico's emergence as a G20 power. Today in the France 24 debate, fighting crime in Mexico. With us to talk about it, Miguel Martinez, Paris correspondent for television station Uno Noticias, who is at the airport when Florence Cassé arrived. We'll talk more about it in a minute. Jean-Marc Sanchez of Paris, the Paris Bar's Franco-Hispanic Commission is also with us, and the former federal U.S. prosecutor, Frederick T. Davis. Welcome, sir. And joining us from London, the former Latin America editor for The Independent, Colin Harding of the consultancy Latin Forum. Thank you for joining us again in the France 24 debate. France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Now, once again, Florence Cassé getting a hero's welcome here, the foreign minister on hand to greet her. What was the scene like at the airport?
It was very impressive for me to see all that the press, the medias in the.
And was it really a hero's welcome? I mean,
it was. I don't know how to say that, but I think that the press was how to say that. Not to say yes, welcome to Cassés, but what the decision of the court yesterday. Certainly have some journalists say why that kind of decision in this moment, no?
So the journalists were also asking questions.
Yeah, asking questions, and was very, very, very interesting.
They're not the only ones. In Mexico itself, it's not necessarily celebrations and jubilation. Nicholas Rushworth filed this story earlier.
Florence Cassé freed from jail and heading home. Some people shouted out at her, "Murderer." She returns home a day after the Supreme Court ruled her detention was unjust.
People are happy. The happiness is shared everywhere, in France and also in Mexico. I've been here for 4 days and everyone speaks well of her. Everyone was hoping that the Supreme Court would free her. That's been the case, and it's about time. It's been 7 years. Time to turn the page.
Some say justice has not been served. This woman, the wife of an alleged victim of the kidnapping Cassé was linked to, is horrified at her release.
We endured 3 months of this kidnapping, and at one point I received my husband's ear as a present. I was pregnant at the time. Is it right that this horrible woman has been freed?
Florence Cassé was jailed for 60 years on charges of being involved with a gang of kidnappers known as the Zodiacs, allegedly run by her then boyfriend. She has consistently proclaimed her innocence. Mexico's Supreme Court ruled her trial was tainted because police had violated her rights by reenacting her arrest live on television in 2005. She was portrayed as a kidnapper. However, the judges did not rule on whether she was guilty or innocent. That's fueled anger among rights activists about the state of the Mexican justice system.
Jean-Marc Sanchez, you were telling us before the show that you have relatives who live in Mexico. So what is your sense of where public opinion feels about this case?
Well, I'm afraid people don't really realize in France and in Western Europe what the Mexicans live each and every day. Do you know, for instance, that each 5 or 6 minutes there is someone kidnapped in Mexico? And just like the rest of Latin America, it's not a game, it's a business. So I'm afraid that even if everybody feels happy for Ms. Cassé to have been released, this is still a never-ending issue for Mexican people.
All right, it was front-page news in the Mexican press as well. Earlier in the week, a star anchor for the Televisa network expressed his regrets on air over the 2005 staging of that live broadcast of Cassé's arrest, admitting it was a reenactment. Not everyone, though, feeling as contrite.
Today, the Supreme Court of Justice is giving her freedom and only looking out for the rights of the accused. The rights of victims were ignored while they were parading her around Paris. Today, they've opened the door to impunity for all criminals.
It should be pointed out that that activist you saw was also at one point a candidate for the party of former President Felipe Calderón. It's definitely a case that at times has strained diplomatic relations between Paris and Mexico City.
Florence Cassé's situation is worrying. And we will not let this young woman spend another 60 years in jail.
She will serve her sentence of 60 years in Mexico for her crimes committed against various people in our country.
Colin Harding, I've heard it said that as long as Calderón was still president of Mexico and Sarkozy was still president of France, she was not going to be let go.
Well, I think that's true, and I think the fact that she's been released very soon after Peña Nieto has taken over is a symbol, if you like, of the determination of Peña Nieto to distance himself from the kind of policies that were pursued by the previous government. And, of course, judicial reform is one of the things that Peña Nieto is now committed to. I mean, the whole case was an embarrassment to Mexico, and I think Peña Nieto wants to put that very much behind him now.
Judicial reform, what's on the table?
Well, they're going to change the way that the whole system is organised. Particularly the police and the investigation system. They're going to try, and or at least this is the declarations that Peña Nieto has made, that they're going to reorganise the federal police and put it in charge much more of investigations in future. They're going to set up specialised units for various different crimes like extortion and kidnapping. They're going to bring the federal police under the control of the Interior Ministry and abolish the State Security Ministry, the Public Security Ministry. So there's a whole gamut of changes that they're proposing to put in place as the basis for a completely different kind of criminal justice system.
Frederick Davis, what do you think are the prospects in that regard?
Well, it's hard to say. I can speak freely because I'm burdened with much knowledge about the criminal justice system in Mexico. What strikes me as interesting is what we've seen just even on the screen the last few minutes is a classic example of a conflict that comes up all the time, certainly in France and the United States, where I have some experience. We saw the former accused and her supporters who were jubilant because they perceived her to be the victim of improper procedures, and yet we saw a family of the victims who feel that someone who's guilty got away. In the last, about a century ago, a very famous American judge talked about a situation where the criminal goes free because the constable has blundered. And every system, certainly including those I'm aware of, has to balance the propriety of the procedures to make sure that...
And I should say, the Supreme Court did not rule on her guilt or innocence. They ruled on the procedure.
Exactly right. And that happens in France, that happens in the United States, where usually what happens is you're talking about evidence, namely you have proof against someone that may have been obtained in improper circumstances and then is kept out, and often that's the only proof you have. And so courts frequently are vigilant on that. But that is a tension that society has. She has not been found innocent. She's not been found guilty either. But what they said was the procedures were improper, therefore we cannot let that stand. And that's an important step in the rule of law. What happens next, whether ideally procedures are improved so that only the guilty are pursued and convicted. I don't think we'll ever get to that 100%, but this is part of the process of improving the procedure so that the criminal does not go free because the constable blundered.
And one person who certainly believes things are changing is Florence Cassé herself.
I think Mexico is experiencing great changes regarding human rights with the new president, Enrique Peña Nieto. A lot of things have been changing since the 1st of December. I think my release will also help to have the right to a fair trial and human rights respected. I think this is a good thing, not just for Florence Cassé, but for the whole of Mexico. Everybody won yesterday.
Miguel Martinez, I've heard there's been resentment on the part of some people, against Cassé, because the idea is, I don't have the backing of the French president, and for somebody I know.
Yeah, I think we need to understand the Mexican people need to understand the process was not clean with Florence Cassé. And
do they understand it now?
I don't know. Yesterday we see that the percentage is 50-50. The Mexican people, they are not agree with the court decision. But now I think and I hope that the Florence Cassé case, now it's gonna be a new era for the justice in Mexico. Everybody knows what happened. It was a not clean case and procedure. And now the court can make, for example, to call to the ex-police chief Garcia Luna to respond to ask what happened in 6 years of Calderon government. What happened with the security in Mexico? More than 6,000 people are dead, and the Florence Cassé opened this box of the injustice in Mexico, and now the people need to understand that.
We had earlier a Google Plus hangout where one of the panelists who follows things that happen over the border between the United States and Mexico was saying how Mexicans have a system loosely based on the Napoleonic Code that we have here in France, but it's very freewheeling, where procedures are sometimes a bit surprising. Do you find that the case when you argue cases in Mexico, that procedures take unusual twists?
Well, the thing is that the tradition, as far as the legal system is concerned, is pretty much influenced by the French civil code. The French code is actually not only spread around Europe, but Latin America. Now, it might be a conflict of interpretation between the Anglo-Saxon approach and the South American one, and my colleague will probably agree with me on that. I don't think, and this is something very interesting you're pointing out here, that the Mexican system is better or worse than any other. And I think that my Mexican friends have been really offended by somehow the way this great country with a great culture and history that has long-lasting relations with France has been treated like if it was a third world country. That is not. Of course, Mexico has a lot of problems of security, especially up north, but don't forget that they have a very close neighbor, the United States of America, that has a higher crime rate than Mexico. Still, all the drug traffic comes along the Mexican way, down to South America, up to Northern America. So Mexico is the only way to get to the United States. So maybe part of the problems you're talking about are not only Mexican, but maybe of outside.
Part of the problems, not only Mexican, but nonetheless, the numbers are just startling. You were mentioning them at the top. According to one monitoring group, the government's statistics on kidnappings grossly underreported. The Council for Law and Human Rights says the number of year-on abductions is up 46% in 2012. 72 kidnappings a day, they say. And these, Colin Harding, don't include what they call express kidnappings, people who are picked up for just a couple of hours before a ransom is paid.
Well, yes. I mean, this is quite common in a number of countries where people are marched to a cash machine and told to take money out with a gun in their back, or they're taken to a safe house and a phone call is made to their family to say, they're made to speak to their family and say, you know, we need money quickly. And they're sometimes released, or perhaps generally released after the money is paid over, but not always. And it's something which is used throughout, certainly throughout the region, and has been very common in a number of countries.
But why is that rate up 46% in 1 year?
Yes, I mean, but because this is possibly one of the byproducts of the kind of policy, at least this is the argument of the current government, of the Peña Nieto government, that the policy of going after kingpins after the big drug bosses pursued by the Calderón government has fragmented or accelerated the fragmentation of the various drug cartels, and they've gone into other activities. They've fought each other, and they've gone into other activities, extortion and kidnapping being one of them. So even the successes of the Calderón government in detaining or killing some of the big bosses has actually made the situation worse, arguably, because the whole situation is much more fragmented, which is why the Peña Nieto government is trying to pursue a different kind of approach to this problem.
Miguel Martinez, is this how you see it?
Yeah, I think now Mexico with the Calderón administration was they lose the power. The cartel was take the power in all the north of the country, the center also, and all the political, some deputies, some local administration was 100% administrated by the drug dealers, and now the Peña Nieto's administration needs to change that. It's now or Mexico. I don't know what.
But the strategy of going after the big bosses, that Colin Harding was saying that as a result, that's what created the chaos that's ensued.
Now the strategy need to go to all the structure in the with the drug dealers, the economy, for example, in Mexico. Everybody knows the drug dealers are there, but they are not operating there. But they invest in, for example, homes or bank. Now with the HSBC
right.
case with the bank,
the HSBC case, yeah. It's basically the idea is you should follow the money. And just very briefly, Frederick Davis, before we go to the break. Jean-Marc was mentioning how it's not just Mexico. I know that the U.S. drug enforcement agency is working in close contact with the Mexicans. Do you think Calderón got some bad advice from the Americans over the past few years?
Boy, that's a loaded question. The issues relating to the drug trade between the United States and Mexico are very, very complicated and very political. The United States is part of the problem, clearly, because it's a major source of demand. And the fact that so many drugs, including marijuana and others, that many people that are even legal now in some states, are in huge demand, and yet our legal drives the price up. And that means for young Mexicans, that's the way to get rich quickly. So
all right, we'll pick
those
up on
politics are very complex.
We'll pick up on the point when we come back. This is the France 24 debate.